Hi, welcome to the Pursuit of Truth. Sorry this one is a little bit late. It was on Sky News a few days ago on Ian King Live, and it's about pharmaceutical companies now. The reason I'm putting this, I know some people may say I cherry pick information. Well, yeah, I guess we all do that, isn't it? We all have a slight confirmation bias when it comes to especially like this channel. This channel is in the pursuit of truth and looking at alternatives and things like that, and so those things grabbed my attention where like I was watching, whose video was it, he put a comment on one of my channels, so I looked at his video. I'll try and put the link in the channel. I'm not going to put the companion of pursuit of truth because there was a part where he talked about different communism and capitalism and the different forms of government and systems and things like that. It was really interesting. It was really eye-opening. But then he started talking about women being, taken over as men, and men should be in charge. So I don't believe in that kind of concept because I believe in equality, and so I couldn't watch after that. But the beginning bits where he talked about the system were quite interesting, so it's worth listening to the beginning of that. I'll put in the link if I can remember whose channel it was. And it was really interesting, but because he was talking about something I hadn't thought about, is the idea of that, often I complain about the system not working because of the suffering that goes on and the inequality and etc. But of course, what like he was saying is that when you sign up, and that's usually through the birth certificate, he was talking about your social number, and that makes you part of the system. But the system does have benefits, and yes, maybe I don't talk about them a lot because I'm concentrating on the inequalities because they're the failings of the system. But yes, there are benefits, definitely. There's healthcare, and there are some social systems where they look after people, and benefits and etc. And we do have a system where there's, especially if you're in the West, where there is good infrastructure and housing and things like that. We're not living in mud huts, and we're not dying of cholera and diseases like those. So yes, there are benefits to the system, but there's also failings to it. But I don't really think you have a choice, because he was saying when you opt into a system, but you don't have a choice. Your parents do your birth certificate, and if you don't do a birth certificate, then you'll find is it £1,000, and then of course you can't use any of the infrastructure. So I don't know how viable that is to say that there is freedom of choice. I don't know. Do people born without birth certificates and not part of the system? Maybe tribes, I guess, would fall into that, if there are any of them left in the Amazon or Africa, if they haven't all been killed or wiped out by the infrastructure that we build. But what I know this is to do with pharmaceutical companies. That's what I want to talk about. I heard it, and it's just another one of the examples where people say, you hear people, when they talk about COVID-19 and the jab and etc. And some people say, oh no, pharmaceutical companies, NHS, doctors, etc., they won't do anything bad. They're looking out for us and all that kind of thing. And people forget that we live in a world where our world is dominated by money. Work and money, they come hand in hand. That's you may believe in God, and God gave you the purpose of life, of living, but the real purpose of most people's lives, even if they do believe in God, is working and money. Despite religion often going against the working part, yes, it's in the Bible that we put there for toil, but money being the root of all evil. And then we're all these religious people lined with money and fighting for money, and allowing inequality over money. So this is from Ian King Live, and it's about investigating pharmaceutical company that put up the price of a drug to the NHS. And it just goes to show you the mindset maybe we have to think about when these pharmaceutical companies, yes, there are some benefits to it. There's a lot of drugs that are keeping people alive and saving people, but I think a lot of it is, there's not many cures. There's a lot of drugs keeping people alive, and that's probably a financial gain because that means you're there always on the payroll. Whereas if they find a cure, then they don't get as much money. So that's an aspect where I think that pharmaceutical companies do need looking at. But when you listen to this, then you'll be thinking twice when you take the tablets or an injection.
Good morning, this is Ian King live, an hour of business and economic news from the heart of the city. Excessive and unfair, egregious breaches of the law, reducing the money available for patient care. That's a damning verdict to the Competition and Markets Authority on pharmaceutical companies that ripped off the National Health Service and taxpayers by inflating prices and paying off would-be competitors. Alden Mackenzie and Activist UK, now known as Accord UK, charged excessively high prices for hydrocortisone tablets. The CMA has fined companies involved more than £260 million. Well, Dr. Michael Grenfell is the CMA's Executive Director for Enforcement, and he joins me now. Dr. Grenfell, morning to you. How did this come to light?
Hello. Well, it came to our attention that the price of these tablets, which are really important tablets to help with adrenal dysfunctions and can be life-saving at times, that the prices of those were rising, and we started to look into it, and we found that after the company had acquired its license to supply back in 2008, it then debranded the hydrocortisone tablets, which meant that they were no longer subject to price regulation. And as a result of that, it was able to hike the price, and it hiked it by 10,000%, so that a pack of hydrocortisone tablets that was 70 pence a pack back in 2008, by 2016 reached in some cases £88 per pack. Now, normally when you debrand and make a drug generic, competition should keep prices low, and that's what you'd expect. But in this case, the company, to prevent any competition and to prevent that happening, reached agreements with two other companies that were potential competitors that were thinking of entering the market, and it paid them not to compete, not to enter the market. So it managed to keep those prices high for many years, causing huge cost burden to the NHS, which, as we know, is pretty cash-strapped, and that, of course, affects all of us. It affects us as patients, and it affects us as taxpayers.
One thing I don't understand about this saga, though, is that we keep hearing that the National Health Service has unparalleled buying power. It's this gigantic state-owned entity, 1.6 million employees. It's got practically a monopoly on healthcare in this country. Is it not capable of seeing off behaviour like this from some of its suppliers?
Well, that works well if it has a choice of suppliers. But in this case, it was the sole supplier. The company was the sole supplier. It bought off two other companies that would have competed against it. This is an important, sometimes life-saving medicine, and the NHS was completely dependent for many years on this company and had very little choice.
Well, you say that, but I mean, you can buy these tablets on Amazon at a fraction of the price that the NHS was paying these suppliers for it. Why didn't it just go and do that?
Now there is competition, but for a number of years there wasn't. It was prevented.
Why did the NHS not blow the whistle on this earlier?
Well, it was drawn to our attention. We've spent a while looking into this, investigating it thoroughly. We have to look at the evidence. We have to uncover the evidence and look very thoroughly. We have to hear the arguments and the evidence that's put to us by all the parties that we're investigating. And there were a number of companies, and some of those companies were taken over by large international corporates, one by a private equity company. So there are a number of companies we had to talk to. We had to hear all their representations, hear all their arguments, and that takes time. In addition, one of the companies tried to prevent us looking at some evidence. We had got a court warrant to look at some evidence, and they went to court to challenge that warrant. And in the end, we prevailed and their challenge failed, but that took well over a year. It took about 15 months, I think, so that caused unnecessary delay.
This is pretty brazen behaviour from these businesses. Now, obviously, you've hit them with a large fine. Would you like to see some of the directors involved being banned from holding office?
I think that's something we're going to consider. So that's one possibility. Another issue is that now that we've made this infringement decision, it's open to the Department of Health and the equivalents in the devolved administrations to sue the companies concerned, and they no longer need to prove the infringement. We've done that with this decision. They can, all they need to prove is the losses they sustained. And just to give you a flavour of those losses, before this infringement started in around 2008, the NHS was paying £500,000 a year for these very important drugs. At the peak price, it was paying £80 million a year.
All right, Michael Grenfell, we have to leave it there. Appreciate you joining me this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
And of course, that's just one. I don't know how many other bad practices are going on. That may be the only one example of pharmaceutical companies making a profit out of medication, or it may just be a scratch of the surface. As you see, it takes years for these things because humans like to investigate things to ad nauseum, especially in Britain. It just takes so long for anyone to make a decision of things, and they waste so much time, and a lot of people, around the world are dying because of the waste of time that these paid people take to do things. But yeah, so this is just an example. Maybe it's the only example, but still, it's an example to show that that's why it's so important that you always use your mind. You've been given it. You always try to discern the truth of everything. You don't just accept it because you hear it on television, because a person in a white coat says it, because someone official says it, some big giant corporation says it, because as you can see, and that's what I'm trying to show, that these systems of corporations and of these trusted people is failing us as a society, as a being, because money is involved, and that seems to be the common denominator of the things that I'm bringing to you, is money, as the Bible says, the root of all evil. And it does seem to be. It's once you, I think, and I've said this many times, once you take money away from medication, I think people would have a lot more trust. Those people that are weary of vaccination or of medication, because they won't need to worry that people are doing it just for the money, and then the problem is, obviously, as we've seen with these things that I've brought recently, the problem is with money is that people see mistakes, but they don't want to report them. They carry on giving these medicines out. People die of these medicines or have problems with them, but all they're worried about is the buck, the cent, the dollar, the pound, the peso in their pocket. Take care, take it easy. God bless and peace.